You hop into your car, turn the key, and hear the engine cranking. But it just won't start. Frustrating, right? Well, don't keep cranking your engine over and over, hoping it will eventually start. Doing this can drain your battery and potentially damage the starter motor. Instead, use the remaining battery power to help diagnose the issue and find the fault. The good news is if your engine is cranking, your battery is in good shape, and the starter motor is working. For an engine to run smoothly, it requires the right mix of air, fuel, compression, and a well-timed spark. If any one of these essential elements is missing or out of balance, the engine won't start. In this video, we'll explore the various reasons why your car might crank but not start and go through each of these critical components to help you pinpoint the problem. Let's see how you can diagnose and take appropriate measure. Subscribe to the channel. 1. Air delivery system issue. If your engine isn't getting enough air, it could be due to a few different issues. Clogged air filter. If the air filter is too dirty, it can prevent the engine from getting enough air, making it hard to start. Check the air filter. If it looks dirty or clogged with debris, it's time to replace it. Clogged idle air control valve. This valve controls the amount of air that bypasses the throttle plate in order to regulate engine idle speed. When this valve gets clogged with carbon deposits or dirt, it can restrict airflow, leading to a rough idle, stalling, or even preventing the engine from starting altogether. If the valve appears dirty, it can often be cleaned with a throttle body or carburetor cleaner. In some cases, the valve may be too clogged or damaged to clean effectively, and it might need to be replaced. Sever vacuum leak. Common sources of vacuum leaks include a cracked vacuum hose, a leaking intake manifold gasket, or a faulty EGR valve. Listen for a hissing sound while the engine is cranking, or use a smoke machine to detect leaks. You can also spray a small amount of carb cleaner around suspected areas and listen for changes in engine speed. Repair or replace the faulty hose or gasket. Mass airflow, MEF, sensor failure. The MEF sensor measures the amount of air entering the engine. If it fails, the engine control unit may not deliver the correct amount of fuel, causing the engine to start briefly and then stall. Check for error codes with an OBD2 scanner. Go to your nearest auto parts store where they usually pull the code for you for free. Or you can grab a cheap OBD2 scanner from the link in the description of this video. A faulty MEF sensor usually triggers a check engine light. Clean the sensor with a dedicated MEF sensor cleaner or replace it if it's faulty. 2. Fuel system related issues. There are a few things that can go wrong with the fuel system. Check the fuel pressure at the fuel rail using a fuel pressure gauge. Check the link in the description if you need a nice fuel pressure test kit. Low pressure might indicate an issue with one of the components of fuel delivery systems. Empty gas tank. This may seem obvious, but an empty gas tank is a common reason why a car won't start. Sometimes, the fuel gauge might be inaccurate due to a faulty sensor. Double-check the fuel gauge and add fuel if needed. Bad fuel pump. To check if the fuel pump is working, turn the ignition key to the on position without starting the engine. You should hear a faint humming or whirring sound from the fuel tank area, indicating that the fuel pump is running. If you don't hear this sound, it could mean the fuel pump is faulty. Fuel pump relay. After the pump, check the fuel pump relay and fuse. You can also check the relay by swapping it with another relay of the same type from the fuse box. If the car starts after swapping the relay, then the original relay is likely defective and should be replaced. Blown fuse. In the fuel system, there are specific fuses that control power to the fuel pump, fuel injectors, and other related components. If a fuse blows due to an electrical short, overload, or fault within the circuit, it can cut off power to these essential components. Check the vehicle's fuse box, typically located under the dashboard or in the engine compartment, and inspect the relevant fuses for any signs of damage, such as a broken filament or burn marks. If a blown fuse is found, replacing it with a new fuse of the same amperage rating is necessary. However, it is important to investigate why the fuse blew in the first place, as there may be an underlying issue that needs to be addressed to prevent further electrical problems. Clogged fuel filter. A clogged fuel filter can restrict fuel flow to the engine. Replace the fuel filter according to your vehicle's maintenance schedule. Bad fuel pressure regulator. The fuel pressure regulator maintains the correct pressure in the fuel rail, ensuring that the fuel injectors are receive the right amount of fuel for proper combustion. If the fuel pressure regulator malfunctions, it can cause either too much or too little fuel to be delivered to the engine, leading to starting problems, poor performance, or stalling. Older fuel pressure regulators are controlled by engine vacuum. Check the vacuum hose connecting the regulator to inlet manifold for any cracks, signs of spilled fuel, or disconnections. If you see or smell fuel in the hose, it indicates that the diaphragm inside the regulator is leaking and the regulator needs to be replaced. Dirty fuel injectors. Over time, fuel injectors can get clogged with deposits, preventing them from delivering the proper amount of fuel. Listen for a rough idle or misfiring. You can also use a fuel injector tester to check the spray pattern. Use a fuel injector cleaner additive or have the injectors professionally cleaned. Error in fuel pump control module. Fuel pump control module controls the voltage sent to the fuel pump based on inputs from the ECU and other sensors, ensuring that the fuel pump provides the correct amount of fuel at varying engine speeds and loads. It is usually located under the rear seat, in the trunk, or near the fuel pump itself, and it's typically integrated into the vehicle's electrical system. Its failure can result in no-start conditions, inconsistent fuel delivery, stalling, or poor fuel efficiency. Inertia switch or fuel pump switch. When the vehicle experiences a significant jolt, such as during an accident or a hard bump, the inertia switch triggers and interrupts the electrical circuit to the fuel pump, effectively cutting off the fuel supply to prevent fuel leakage or a potential fire. After activation, the inertia switch typically needs to be manually reset to restore fuel flow, which can be done by pressing a button on the switch, usually located in the trunk or near the front passenger footwell. 3. Ignition system issues. Without a spark, the fuel-air mixture in your engine won't ignite. This can be caused by bad spark plugs. Spark plugs can get fouled with carbon deposits, oil, or fuel, preventing them from creating a spark. Remove and inspect the spark plugs. If they're black, oily, or wet with fuel, they're fouled. You can test it with spark tester to make sure they're producing the right amount of spark. Replace the spark plugs with new ones. Make sure to gap them correctly according to your vehicle specifications. Faulty ignition coils. In modern cars, each cylinder has its own coil. You can check for trouble codes with an OBD2 scanner and replace the faulty ignition coil. You can also use spark tester to identify the faulty coil. Of course, failure of one coil or spark plug usually will not result in crank, but not start condition. And the likelihood of all the wires failing at the same time is very low. If you have older cars with distributor ignition, visually inspect the coil pack for any cracks, corrosion, or visible damage. Use a multimeter to check the resistance of the ignition coil. Also visually inspect the distributor cap and rotor for cracks or corrosion. 4. Compression loss. Low compression can be due to a blown head gasket, warped cylinder head, worn piston rings, or a burnt valve. Perform a compression test using a compression gauge. If one or more cylinders show low compression, you have an issue. This is a more complicated repair as it may involve a valve job or replacing piston rings. Depending on the cause, you might need to replace the head gasket, rebuild the engine, or replace the engine entirely. 5. Timing. Timing is crucial for an engine to run smoothly. If the timing is off, the air-fuel mixture won't ignite at the right moment. Timing chain or belt. The timing belt or chain controls the opening and closing of the engine valves. If it jumps or skips a tooth, the engine timing will be off. Listen for unusual noises while cranking. You can also check the timing marks on the crankshaft and camshaft pulleys to see if they are aligned correctly. If the timing belt or chain has skipped a tooth, it will need to be realigned or replaced. Failed crankshaft or camshaft position sensor. Modern ignition systems rely on a crankshaft and camshaft position sensor to determine the correct firing sequence. If they fail, the ECU might not send a spark at the right time. Use an OBD2 scanner to check for error codes. A failed sensor will usually trigger a check engine light. Inspect the sensors for signs of damage or wear and check the wiring and connectors for corrosion or loose connections. Faulty sensors. Sensors like the throttle position sensor, map sensor, MEF sensor, or engine coolant temperature sensor can cause starting issues if they fail. Use an OBD2 scanner to check for error codes related to sensors and replace the faulty sensor. The ECM. The ECM can also shut off the fuel supply if it detects a critical safety issue, such as a severe vacuum leak, misfire, a faulty sensor, or malfunction in the ignition system. Security system malfunction. Some cars have an immobilizer system that can prevent the engine from starting if it detects an issue, such as a faulty key fob. Look for a flashing security light on the dashboard. Check the owner's manual for reset procedures or try using a spare key. Remember to diagnose systematically. Start with the easiest and most common problems first. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more automotive tips and tricks.